As we get into this later part of the holy season of Easter, the texts talk about Jesus going away. He's going to be leaving the disciples with his physical presence. Someday in the future, he will come back. Meanwhile, he's telling them how to survive without his being present with them the way he has been. He's going to be with them still, but in a different way. And that is somewhat the theme. Little children, the psychologists say, when they're afraid of being separated from their parents, go through an experience of what's called separation anxiety. There are other terms that mean the same thing for us as adults. Another way of putting it is fear of abandonment. And at different times we feel alone in life and look about us for support to overcome that aloneness. And this is something of what the disciples felt, because the mission of Jesus then was in their hands. And then things went further. Another big crisis in the early church was when the apostles began to die and Jesus had not yet returned still. But as with the apostles and Jesus, so that responsibility was handed on to those who remained. And so it has been going on for all of these centuries. You know, now that I'm in my 70s, I look back on my parents and my teachers, and many have died. And now it is my responsibility to maintain what they have given me. And so how do we do that? The gospel has some ideas that Jesus shares with us here, and that is that if they love one another, they will be keeping the word that he had received from his Father and shared with them. And that love is something that unites them, and something that will continue to allow him to be present with them through his Spirit, who will be present as an advocate, somebody who remains as a tutor and a teacher and a guide. Very soon we will celebrate the coming of that Holy Spirit upon those apostles, those qualities of tutor and teacher and guide may continue to be with them and on to this day with us as well. I have told you this while I am still with you. The advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom I will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all that I have told you. And so the wisdom and inspiration and guidance of the Holy Spirit will continue to be there for us. It's the gift of the Holy Spirit is what enables us to continue on and to realize that we're not very alone after all, because God is with us. God continues to be with us. And then he goes on and says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Do not be afraid." At those times, that was a key word. The disciples automatically would have paid very close attention if they weren't up until then when he said that he was leaving them his peace, because the Messiah was the one who would bring peace. That is the gift of the Messiah, the key to the leadership that God had provided to them through Jesus, and a tranquility and a harmony and a unity. So having talked about unity, I'd like to turn some thoughts to the Acts of the Apostles. And here it was, all of the original Christians were Jews, and they knew very well the law of Moses, and they continued to practice the law of Moses, as did Jesus throughout his life. And Jesus' teaching, as we know, were not in contradiction to the law of Moses. They fulfilled it and brought it to completion. And what Jesus did was simplify, to take all of the 613 commandments of the Jewish law and sum them all up in two. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. Even the 10 commandments are all, if you look at all the other 8, they all actually go back to those 2 first ones. And so what were these? They were called Judaizers. They wanted people who were joining the church who knew nothing about the law of Moses, the Gentiles. They were never Jews, yet they were attracted to the message of Jesus. And so the Judaizers came from Jerusalem without any authority to do this, and they came up to the Gentile cities and were saying that, oh, if you want to be Christians, if you want to, they didn't use the word Christian, if you want to be disciples of Jesus, you have to have all the observances that Moses gave us. And this isn't what Paul had been saying, St. Paul. This isn't what Barnabas had been saying. And so Paul and Barnabas realized that the people who were becoming confused, went to Jerusalem to have a council with the leaders of the church in Jerusalem. And the leaders of the church in Jerusalem were like the original apostles, and especially James had become leader of the apostles of the church in Jerusalem. And they called the first ecumenical council of the church in the year 49, the Council of Jerusalem. And in that council, which is here in chapter 15 of the Acts of the Apostles, the very heart of the book of Acts, that was a crossroad and a key decision on where the church would go from then on, and what it would be its identity when Gentiles as well as Jews were included in its membership. And of course, as we know, finally the Gentiles far outnumbered the Jews throughout the world in the number who were followers of Jesus. And so they were concerned about the growth and stability and unity of the early church. And so they sent a letter, and not only to be delivered by Paul and Barnabas, who represented the Gentile church, but Judas and Silas from the Jerusalem community. And they talked about basically 2 things. What Peter the apostle had been saying, 2, that those who came into Christianity, into the community of faith of Jesus, did not have to follow the Mosaic law, the law of Moses, and all of its laws. And James the apostle said, nor do they have to follow all of its rituals and customs and feasts. They did not have to continue to observe the Jewish feasts, of which they knew nothing. In fact, there were only 2 things left, and one of them was to observe what is appropriate in terms of sexual conduct. And then all the more so they focused in this reading and in many other places about the dietary laws. And not that the dietary laws in and of themselves were sacrosanct, meaning unalterable, untouchable. The reason they gave some deference to the dietary laws is because they were so universally observed amongst the Jewish people that if they changed them, changed that part of it, the Jewish Christians would be feeling really and truly undermined and undercut. And they didn't want that to happen. They wanted all of them to stay together and to worship together. And so that is the spirit in which they send this letter and with this message. If you keep free of doing these limited things that we ask of everybody, you will be doing what is right. Farewell. Those laws of fasting, in a way, have continued to be part of Christian practice all through these centuries, even till today. Although Pope Paul VI made an interesting change back in 1966 with an apostolic letter which had the name Paenatemini. You can look it up on the internet, Paenatemini and its contents. And what Paul VI did was a radical departure, in a way, from what had been a very general Christian practice on fast and abstinence. When he said there are 2 days on which all Christians throughout the world should observe fast and abstinence. And you know what they are: Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And then if there was a desire to add other days of fast in addition to those, that was up to you as individual Christians or up to conferences of bishops, for example, from the different countries. And here in the United States, as you know, not too long after Pope Paul VI wrote that letter, the bishops of the United States in their meeting said, well, here in the United States, we will keep the law of fast and abstinence on Fridays during Lent, because that's what the American people are used to as a practice. But it kind of limited the power of the message of Paul VI, who zeroed in on those 2 days. Now, why would he limit it that way? What justification could there be? Probably, perhaps, because, and I don't think Paenatemini says this, but basically it goes back to the gospel itself. Why do your disciples not fast and the disciples of the scribes and the Pharisees do? And the answer of Jesus is they cannot fast as long as their master is with them. The day will come when I am no longer with them, and on that day they will fast. And so if sin separates us from God, we might employ fasting and abstaining as a way of spiritual renewal. That's our choice, one of the many things we can do. The most important one, of course, is the sacrament of reconciliation. But if we do that fast and abstinence type of observance in order to come close to God again, fine. But the only time that we really as a church as a whole experience that absence of the Lord is when the penitential emphasis on Ash Wednesday itself, even more than the rest of Lent, and Good Friday, the day that Jesus died on the cross. So you see the logic of it. And it's that type of renewal of the Spirit where finally in 1966 we went that far away from the original Jewish tradition, yet they could continue to observe it, just like they could continue to observe the law of Moses if that was their background. And we have to have that freedom to welcome people with different customs and understandings and practices to be a truly Catholic or universal church, where there's a place for everyone, that we are united by the Holy Spirit, by the things that are absolutely essential, that make us, have us one Lord and one faith and one baptism. And the book of Revelation today, I'll finish with that, it very much talks about this, because what had happened when the book of Revelation was written? Well, it was a time of persecution for Christians, that is. The Christians had been expelled from the synagogues, and so they were no longer welcome to worship with the Jews, and the Jewish religion was recognized and protected by Roman law. Christianity was not. And so that made them very vulnerable when they were no longer part of the synagogue. And the other thing that had happened was that the temple had been destroyed in the year 70 by the Roman general Titus and his soldiers, and the city leveled to the ground. And as you know, the temple was never rebuilt after that. So without any Jerusalem, what was the major city left in the ancient world? Rome. And what was the Roman world like? It was a place where the Christians were persecuted by the emperor. So what was there to turn to? Well, the author of Revelation says, "The angel took me to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God." The new Jerusalem would replace those earthly cities. And it was radiant, and it had precious stones that gleamed there, and massive high walls to protect against evil coming in. And the high priest wore those precious stones on his robes when he was in the Holy of Holies. And so the presence of that element of worship with which they were familiar was going to be there in the heavenly city. And there were 12 gates, three in each direction, east and west and north and south. And why? So that there was plenty of entrances for everybody from all the four corners of the world. That's why. From everywhere. All people could come who were seeking God. They were welcome there. And who else was there? Well, the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. So all the Jews, the Israelites, would be there. And the 12 apostles, all the Christians would be there. And there was no temple because people had a closeness to God that didn't need anything in between. The experience of God was direct. And the light for the city didn't depend on the sun and the moon and the stars. It was the glory of God that gave it its light. You see the inspiration and the welcoming in this wonderful passage. So we've had some very important readings today as we have that experience of how do we carry on from here when all these things are going on? How is it possible to continue? Well, we can. Fear not, a little flock. I am with you always. And I have overcome the world. I will not leave you orphans. I am with you.